Hello. Welcome to the Center for Scholars and Storytellers' very first live stream. I'm Yalda.
I'm George.
And we are here to talk about storytelling as social change, why and how stories have impact. Before we start, I just want to give a little shout out to our team behind the camera, Qua, Paul, and Caroline. They're really working hard behind the camera to make this all happen. Thanks for tuning in.
They've sat through many rehearsals of this. So let's begin. Let's start with Yalda. What is the Center for Scholars and Storytellers?
Well, first of all, we were very pleased to be in the UCLA magazine. So run out and get your copy, UCLA alumni. I don't think you can buy it anywhere, or you can find an article on our website, the Center, World Wide Web, scholarsandstorytellers.com, all about our work. So what we are is a group of people who believe in the power of storytelling to shape youth development in both positive and negative ways, but we're kind of hoping it'll lean towards the positive. So we bring together scholars and storytellers. In this instance, I'm the scholar, although George is too. He's the storyteller.
Yep.
But I was a former storyteller, which we'll get to. And we try to find shared goals and research agendas and ways that we can use the science of how storytelling impacts kids to help improve youth outcomes. So our vision is, and I'm just going to read it off of our website, unlocking the power of storytelling to help the next generation thrive and grow. So I have one little thing to give you an example of what my aha was. So we started in January of this year. We have a group of collaborators of over 50 research scientists from around the world who work with us. And we started because I realized there was all this incredible research out there that storytellers don't have access to, and they don't understand. It's behind paywalls. It's hard to read. As George just said, he was reading a peer-reviewed article and fell asleep on the first page. And this study looked at the show Clifford the Red Dog. And I don't know if I've told you about
Clifford.
this. Yes, I'm sure you do. So this was a study done by Mary Louise Mayer and colleagues, and she basically was interested in whether this story would teach the kids that were watching the show to be inclusive. So there was a character in the show, a dog that had a disability, a physical disability, came to the neighborhood, and everybody was scared of playing with this dog. They thought they could catch the disease. They thought they could break this dog's leg further. And Mary Louise and colleagues decided to ask the kids what they thought the message of the show was after it was done. And guess what they thought the message was?
Get a four-legged dog?
Ha!
No.
Almost. They all were worried that if they played with somebody, a dog or a person that had a handicap, that they would also either, they went into fear. They were worried they'd actually catch something, that they'd hurt the person, so they got the exact opposite message of the story. So what ended up happening, and when they further broke it down, they realized the show had 9 minutes of fear in it, which was, all the fear, all the different storylines, and 1.5 minutes of inclusivity, everything's great, wrap up. They took out the fear, put in a different storyline, just a plain storyline, and replayed it for kids, and with that, they got the actual message of the show.
Oh, wow.
So the whole point of that is that fear for very young kids is very, very challenging for them to process. So if a storyteller puts fear, which is a common storytelling mechanism.
It is. No, it is a tool that you want to use to heighten suspense, to
Exactly.
get points across. It can be a very powerful tool.
Exactly. But for little kids, especially when it overwhelms the storyline, they may only focus on that and they may not get your message. So there's research like that out there in the world that I felt was important to share with storytellers.
No, absolutely. Because as a storyteller, our intent is not to, want people to avoid the three-legged dog.
Yes,
We
exactly.
want them to embrace the three-legged dog.
Yeah.
And I think in our efforts to make that point, we might employ some storytelling techniques that aren't suitable for younger audiences. And there are different ways to tell it as well.
Right. Totally. So now we're going to segue into telling you a little bit about our backgrounds. George, why don't you give your background?
Well, I started out as an assistant at the studios, and that's where I first met Yalda. That was some 20 years ago.
We were 10.
Yeah, we were 10, exactly. Little babies in the industry. I took my experiences of being an assistant in Hollywood and made a movie about that called Swimming with Sharks. And
Excellent movie.
and since that time,
And we know who the character was, the real person.
the character was purely fictitious. Any resemblance to persons living or dead, purely coincidental. Anyways, so since that time, I've been working in the industry, in film, in TV, streaming. I do a lot of rewrite work for directors like Robert Rodriguez and Luc Besson. I've been a writer on Law & Order SVU. And when Yalda first approached me about setting up the Center for Scholars and Storytelling, what sort of appealed to me was not only a chance to work with you again, after 20 years, but the fact that I now have a 4 and 5-year-old boys, and look, they get a lot more media than they should. I know that.
No, it's okay.
Even after reading your book, Digital Moms and Digital, what is
Media
it?
Moms and
Media
Digital
Moms
Dads.
and Digital
This is
Dads.
not meant to be a plug for that.
Yeah, but plug. Yalda wrote a great book, sort of surveying, how we should be looking, or watching media with our kids. And so when this opportunity came along to sort of like use storytelling, because let's be honest, a lot of us, we use media to help raise our kids, to, tell stories that we hope will shape them. So
In positive ways.
So establishing a center that will, help us do it correctly, I think is definitely, a great resource to have out there.
Well, and as actually I was talking to a kid from YouTube, somebody who works at YouTube, great kid, and he's working with kids and families, and there are a lot of people, a lot of writers who write content for kids.
Right.
They don't have kids. They don't have PhDs in child development. They're incredible writers and storytellers, and they're funny, and they know how to engage, but they may not understand child development, and that's what we're hoping to help with. So my background is I spent 15 years in the film business, started with George, was at MGM and Sony, last job was senior vice president at MGM, and then stepped off, had my own 2 children, a girl and a boy, and went back to school here at UCLA to get a PhD in child development. And I studied how media impacts kids, how it affects kids. And as I was doing that, I was realizing that there's a lot of this great research that I didn't think storytellers knew about, the people in industry I thought would be interested in it. And because had been in the storytelling business, Lisa Henson offered to throw an event at the Henson Studios, and we brought together a whole bunch of scholars and a whole bunch of children's TV writers, and we talked about the research, and they loved it. And because of that, I got the inspiration to start the Center for Scholars and Storytellers. So now I do research here at UCLA. I teach a class called Digital Media and Human Development, and I run the center.
Now, you were also involved in Common Sense Media, right?
And Common Sense Media, yeah. So Common Sense Media is a great nonprofit. I launched their LA office, and I've worked with them as an advisor, and can ask any questions about that too. We're hoping you will ask questions, and at some point we're going to read a couple of the questions that have come in to us in advance. But first, I'm going to give some examples about the power of storytelling. And as you know, if you're just tuning in, it's Storytelling is Social Change, Why and How Stories Have Impact. I'm Dr. Yalda T. Uhls.
And I'm George Huang.
Professor at UCLA. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of why stories are very powerful and why they're an incredible mechanism for social change. One of them is about a study. This was an actual randomized controlled experiment where they took 2 different pieces of content, an 11-minute movie and an 11-minute documentary. And both of them had the same information in them about cervical cancer. And they decided to play each of them for different audiences, and measure whether it changes first information, knowledge around it, but also around behavior, especially with African American women and Latinx women who traditionally don't go to get pap smears as much as highly educated Caucasian women. So these two short films, where one was a documentary and one was a fictional story, were shown, and the fictional story actually led, even 6 months after they were both shown, to a greater increase for African American women and Latinx women going to get pap smears.
Wow. Wow. And the audience for that was probably, it's an older demographic, right?
Yeah.
So, and we're talking about
Adults.
people who are informed, adults who, are responsible, can make responsible decisions. So if a narrative film has the power to do that, imagine what it can do for young children whose minds are still developing, who still haven't quite grasped the idea of responsibility and what the world has for them. So that's amazing.
And it's very powerful for older people as well. I mean, really. But the focus that we do at the Center for Scholars and Storytellers is actually adolescence, because we believe that adolescence, it's a time of when they're seeking their identity, they're figuring out who they are, their brains are highly flexible, they're sort of making their way out to the world, they're paying more attention to their friends, they're paying less attention to the adults, and they're paying more attention to media. So it's a really powerful time to get to kids. And that goes to my second example. So this one was not a research study. There is no actual proof of this, but there is a correlation, possibly. So the implicit association tests, where they test unconscious bias, during the years that Obama was president, they tested whether unconscious race bias went down. This was between 2008 to 2016. There was no change in unconscious race bias, even though we had an African American president.
What? Are you kidding?
I think we may know that now, but
Okay.
back in 2016, everybody was shocked.
That's insane, because he's been held up as an example of, okay, look, we're making progress.
Yep.
We're living now in a post-racial society.
Yep.
But
No, we're not. And there was
my
no
God.
change. At the same time, however, they measured LGBTQ bias, unconscious bias, and they found that bias was reduced by 13%. So what was going on in the culture then that was actually changing social norms, making this change in unconscious bias or implicit biases be so powerful?
I don't know. Was the Obama administration doing anything initially?
Glee!
What?
They actually say it's media representation. That was
All right.
one of the things that they believe. And Glee is an adolescent show. It changed social norms. It made it had a character that people fell in love with. That made kids sort of really identify with that kid. So, and these characters, and they believe that this contributed. At the same time, there was Will and Grace, Pretty Little Liars, all these different sort of ways that they were just normalizing LGBTQ. So this shows the power, and particularly at this age, the power of this kind of representation.
So a singing and dancing show on Fox was more formative than the President of the United States.
Exactly. Good takeaway. So I'm gonna, before I give my last example, what about writing as a superpower? Tell us all about that.
Well, I mean, I think that example, it's like, look, growing up as a kid, like everyone's, let's go, the aspiration was, let's become President of the United States. But writing is a legitimate way to change and shape the world as well. It's our superpower. I mean, we often hear that, look, history is written by the winners, but no, it's not. History is written by the writers. There have been recent studies that show that, storytelling can actually affect the brain, that the emotions that we can, conjure up with a good narrative, releases certain endorphins and adrenaline, dopamine into our brains that helps facts stick. Unfortunately, they can be used as a supervillain power, hence the rise of fake news. But it can also be a power that can be used for good, which is what we're trying to do here at the Center for Scholars and Storytelling.
Absolutely. So I was trying to find us on Instagram, and because I am technologically inept, I couldn't figure out how to get to Instagram. Our story, hopefully other people can, and also on Facebook. So if you're just tuning in, it's Storytelling as Social Change, Why and How Stories Have Impact. And I'm Dr. Uhls.
I'm George Huang.
Professor George Huang. It's kind of funny for me to say that. I
It's
know
still new
George.
for me too.
So last but not least, there's one more example, and this came from the State of Social Impact, which was a report put out by the Skoll Social Impact Center, which is housed in Georgia's department. And they found all these different examples, and they had writers and actors and all these different people talk about why stories have power. But this was an actual piece of research within that about Day After Tomorrow. So Day After Tomorrow, anyone remember that? I'm assuming you do.
Yeah, it was one of the Roland Emmerich, because he blew up the White House in Independence Day, so he decided, I'm going to blow up the whole world in Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is basically a look at, the worst case scenario of climate change when basically the Earth rebels against us. And,
yeah. And this was done a long time ago, 15 years ago. So right, 2004, I think.
Yeah.
So basically they measured climate change attitudes and beliefs between the people that saw the movie and the people that didn't see the movie. And the people that saw the movie thought that climate change, they increased their thoughts about it being real. They believed that what happened in the movie was a more imminent risk. They really sort of understood, and there was a lot more conversation in the web environment at that point and stories around climate change. And they actually measured it. It showed larger changes in attitudes, beliefs, and behavioral attentions around climate change for watchers and non-watchers, the largest changes were around the storyline topics. So this was a piece of popcorn entertainment, really meant to entertain and make lots of box office, and it did. And yet it was incredibly powerful and measured as a way to measurably change people's attitudes. Now we're in a world where you can actually watch a piece of content and possibly also talk about it on social media.
Right.
So there's a way to sort of, and if you plan ahead, you tell a story, you have a piece of content about a certain topic, and then you do a social media campaign around it, or you try to link people to resources, there may be even more opportunities for impact. I mean, that's kind of what Participant Pictures is all about, creating social impact campaigns around the content. That's where we are now, and that's where we're hoping we'll be.
That's great.
So now I'm going to go to...
Should we go to questions?
Questions.
All right.
So my first one was submitted by, this was submitted in advance, and I'm really sorry if I say people's names wrong, by Hermione Lake. And I think this is for George. Have you read Freud on Storytelling, where he remarks on the ability of children to tell stories in order to fix or understand their world? And why do you think that storytelling is seen as a soft subject when authors are novices or studying the humanities? And only when they become famous and well-known is creativity, this is a long one, is creativity truly appreciated or given any form of kudos, particularly in the West?
Wow. That's a long one. There's
That's
lots
a
to
long
unpack
one.
there.
Yep.
Okay, so Freud on Storytelling. So Hermione, I'm not familiar with that text. I am familiar, though, with there's a book by Bruno Bettelheim called The Magical Uses of Enchantment, and I believe he was a disciple of Freud. And basically he breaks down all of Grimm's fairy tales as a sort of coping mechanism for children, as a way to expose them to the dangers of the world and help them process some of the fears that they may have of the unknown and the dangers out there. No, absolutely. And fortunately, it's come under some scrutiny in the most recent years because he's been accused of plagiarism and so it's like, uh-oh.
Well, we actually, I'm just going to give a plug to on our site, on Story Insights, in that section, we have research-driven insights for storytellers, and we actually have a professor, Daphne Lemnish, who wrote a article on fears
okay.
around the world
Right.
and how to help children sort of process their fears. And she spoke to hundreds of kids around the world and adults to try to understand what they remembered
Right.
from, like, do you remember the time you were most scared watching something? And then sort of trying to address that through storytelling.
Yeah. And so, yeah, if you take a look at a lot of like Grimm's fairy tales, they are really dark and bleak, and they're not happy endings. God, I remember when I went to film school, you know, they showed Little Mermaid, and the filmmakers came to talk to the students, and one of the students actually asked, it's like, well, in the original Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, the Little Mermaid dies. Why did you not stick to the original ending? And the filmmakers just sort of sat there and said, it's a Disney picture. We can't kill the Little Mermaid. But in doing so, you know, one of the points that Bruno Bettelheim wanted to make was that it's sort of, you know, by giving him the happy ending, it takes away their ability to process or how to, you know, get through fear, get through danger, the fact that it is out there, and that they will survive it somehow. So this is a very telling.
But
right.
that is, if you go back to what I told you about the Clifford
Right.
the Red
Yeah.
Dog example,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
So that is
Yeah,
the traditional way storytelling started.
Exactly.
Fear, right?
Fear, yeah.
Yeah. But what we're finding is that if you
Right.
perhaps, you know, that fear was necessary back then. Like
Right.
maybe you didn't want your kid to go out in the woods, right? There were certain things that you really wanted them. It actually had a real world behavioral message it was trying to
Right.
get out. But
No.
they're not necessarily the same messages you need to get out now. And little
Exactly.
kids will focus on the fear.
Right. But you know, do you think in sort of like, you know, trying to make these stories safer by giving them the happy ending where everything resolves is a better way to get that message across? Or, you know, because this is very telling. In the last presidential election, you know, I saw a study where young voters weren't turning out because you know, they were raised on Harry Potter, you know, where in Star Wars, where they believe good always wins out. So they didn't need to do it. They didn't take any agency because in their minds, they've been trained by these stories that good will always prevail. And so came a big shock to a lot of people. You know, when,
As a scientist, I have to say,
Exactly.
that's a leap. That seems like a
I know,
correlation.
it seems like a leap, yeah, but, you know.
But at the same time, I totally get it, and it may not, I mean, I'm only saying for a certain age group.
Right.
So with adolescents and young people, maybe those cautionary tales are more powerful.
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
no,
There isn't
absolutely.
research on that. We're hoping we can do research at some point on
Right.
this. But for young kids, there have been many studies that have shown that if you smuggle in a message wrapped in fear, the chance is the young child will not get the message you're intending.
Okay.
So
Interesting. Okay. And then see the
Okay.
second part is so well known for creativity. So so it's tough. So you know I can just relate personally my own story. So you know my parents are immigrants from Taiwan. You know they came over here with nothing. And so, you know, their biggest fear has always been, how are you going to provide for a family? How are you going to provide? How are you going to, you know, make ends meet? And so when I told them, you know, I wanted to be a writer, they just sort of looked at me and said, no, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, something that gets a steady salary that you can support a family, you know. But it was something I truly passionately wanted to do, which is why, you know, I went to business school before I went to film school because, you know, I had
That's
to.
what you're supposed to
Yeah,
do.
that's what
I
you're
went
supposed
to
to do.
business school
Exactly, yeah. You know, so I was able to persuade my parents, look, I can always fall back on accounting if I need to, but give me a couple years to at least try this, please, because this is what I really want to do. And so very begrudgingly.
Is that when I met you?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. They let
In
me.
those couple of years?
Exactly, let me sort of go out and try to explore the world of, you know, storytelling and entertainment. Despite the fact that, you know, this is what I've been doing as a career for the last 20 years, you know, they still haven't told any of my family or friends what I do for a living. You know? Yeah, they don't say, oh, he's a writer.
Aren't they proud of you as being a professor?
Well, that's
now?
the thing. That's when So when UCLA finally hired me as a professor of screenwriting, this is when they started handing out my business cards to friends and family. Yeah, beforehand it was like, you know, well, what's George doing? Oh, he just bought a house. He's good. Yeah. They, you know, I don't know if it's a shame or something, but you know, the idea that storytelling, you know, gives you some sort of satisfaction, that it's entertainment. It feels more like a pleasure than hard work. And it's interesting, I've been doing a lot of work with Chinese financiers now because a lot of the money from China is coming in. But, even in that culture, they don't quite understand the worth behind storytelling because, so like, okay, so we'll pitch the idea, hey, we're going to do this and this and this. That's great, go do it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so we got to negotiate the payments. It's like, well, why would we pay you? It's like, because it's my time. It's like, but they come from, a farming society, a manufacturing society. Their attitude is it's not a hard good.
Right.
If we can't hold it in our hands,
Right.
if we can't go and put it on a market shelf somewhere and sell it, what is its worth? And, I think you find that internationally across the board in a lot of different economies. But that being said, those economies still want to be part of the storytelling. They want to get involved.
Yeah.
They just haven't quite figured out how to place a value on
Yeah,
it.
and it's funny because storytelling, even, just as something that can help anyone in any career has started to become more valued because we understand that we have to tell stories to the public, and we have government people asking us to help them with storytelling.
And it's been sort of like the dirty little secret
Yeah.
in business.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, our old boss, Peter Goober, wrote that big business book, Tell to Win, how you can influence, make millions, but with storytelling.
And he was a teacher at UCLA.
Yeah, and he's still I think the chair emeritus, or
that's
so
hilarious.
he's still involved. But he makes a very valid point. I mean, take a look at commercials. The commercials that, have the impact that, get your kids to say, buy me that cereal, buy me that toy, are the ones that tell the best stories, because those are the stories that stick.
Yeah.
So it's sort of been the dirty little secret.
Yeah, and I do have to say,
world,
I mean, even in psychology, when I started getting my degree in 2009, there were very few psychologists that believed that media was something that would actually impact children.
Right.
And even then, it was sort of the dirty sort of small, nobody was very interested in taking on students like that and even studying it. Cut to 10 years later, now we're in a world where children watch up to 9 hours, watch and consume media, including music, up to 9 hours every day outside of school. And now they're taking it seriously.
Yeah.
They're completely sold.
Yeah, because it used to be a treat. It used to be like a rare thing. You'd have to get in your ar and go out to a movie theater and see something, or broadcast TV.
Be on live.
Be on live television. Now everything's on demand. It's at our fingertips. My 4-year-old knows how to access YouTube. My parents can't figure it out, but my 4-year-old can grab my phone and find the exact video he wants on YouTube. Anytime he wants.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've had this experience, maybe not. When my kid was young, what she tried to do, she was watching live TV and she tried to fast forward it.
No.
So it's a whole new world
we
now.
just stayed at a hotel and they couldn't understand why I couldn't go back on the TV. It's like, we're at a hotel, this isn't our TV, it's not recording. They didn't understand that. They wanted it on demand. They wanted their show on demand. It's like, no, this is just live TV. They didn't understand that at all.
So if you're just tuning in, this is Storytelling as Social Change, How and Why Stories Have Impact, and we would love any questions. We have a few we're going to share, but if you have any questions about anything we're talking about, please send them in, and we'd be happy to answer them live while we're filming this. So I'm going to read you another question that just came in from Brian McCauley. As a screenwriting professor, how do you encourage students to engage in informed and socially responsible storytelling without being too preachy or encroaching on a burgeoning writer's creative voice?
Right.
Such an important question.
Yes, and especially in these times. I mean, we live in, some people say it's too sensitive. Some people say, we're developing a sense of awareness. Look, here at UCLA, the biggest thing we want to teach our screenwriters is to develop your own voice. Stay true to your own authentic voice. Look, we saw this in the studios. When we're working there. A lot of times creatively, you're going to try to get pushed to the middle because you want to appeal to as a broad and as an audience as possible. But as a writer, when you're writing, I can't anticipate what you would want to see, what you would find funny, what you would want to tune into. The only audience I know for certain is myself. So you write for your voice, for your audience. That being said, we all have blind spots, that we're not aware of until someone in the room points it out to us, which is why, as a screenwriting professor, we workshop the pages. The writers will bring it in. We read it out loud to 7 or 8 of the other students, and they're able to point out things that they bump up against or they find offensive that as a writer, we didn't even think about. And then it's on you as a writer to figure out, okay, if enough people are telling you, no, don't do that, it's something to consider. An example, I had a student who was writing a period piece in Alaska, sort of about the settling of that territory, and in it he wrote the pilot started out with a rape scene, of a Native American, and it became sort of the incident that would launch the investigation and the whole long arc of that season. When I read it, I thought it was completely fine. Every girl in the room pointed out, we are so tired of rape being a narrative device, just to move things across. And it was something the writer wasn't aware of. It was something that I wasn't aware of, and I just think it helps to have diverse other voices in the room that can point out certain blind spots that you're not aware of. Because look, it was not the writer's intent to offend a female audience, but if there's another way to kick off the things besides a rape, then let's investigate that. So I think authenticity, write to yourself, write what speaks to you, but also be curious about having other people weigh in with their opinions, and be respectful of that.
And another thing I can say, Don Cheadle, I had a project with him once when I was a producer, and we had a project that was actually, it was about slavery, yet it was a horror movie. So basically, we had imagery about slavery, and the characters sort of learned about slavery, but it was a straight up horror story with jump cuts and everything. And he said, this is what you do. You smuggle the message in. And that's what we're hoping is, and at the center what we do is we really hope, and we believe that we understand the storytelling mindset. We have people that have been in the industry for a long time working here with us. We want and understand the first goal is to get the biggest audience ever. So how do you get that audience? You write for yourself, you write truth, you write authenticity. This generation cares more about authenticity than any other generation. They care about social impact. They're the most, under 9 years old, are majority minority, so they're very diverse. So you really, to get that audience, you have to make sure that you are actually in some way smuggling in social impacts, smuggling in diversity, inclusivity, equity, trying to bring in all these different stories. Plus, we're at the point where so many, thank God for YouTube on some level, all these different stories are being told that nobody, I was reading about Lily Singh, who is now gonna have a talk show. And she started on YouTube, 20 years ago, there were gatekeepers, there were only certain people. Now everybody can put their show on the air and they find an audience, and we're seeing that, African-American movies can play overseas. Asians, there is a large audience, so all these different things that you want to do, and the more you can appeal to this generation through telling your own story and making sure it has all the beats that it needs to have, the better.
But more importantly, be curious about other people's stories as well. Be curious about the world, Because I'll be honest, as a writer, I'm big on research. I love doing tons and tons of research. In fact, I often have to put a limit on myself because I'll never get to writing. I'll just do deep dives into subjects. But it's been in my experience that the truth outflanks fiction every single time. You'll always come across this nugget, this moment or story that you could have never come up with on your own, and it's a truth, and that makes it really powerful. Even in just one of our conferences, I sat at the foster care table, and Marion
This is a to talk to you real quickly, give you some context on the foster care table. We have thrown several events where we bring together scholars and storytellers, and this year we're working on 5 different issues. And that UCLA magazine will talk to you about the foster care work we're doing. Colleen Russo-Johnson's working on it, and so Marion Gilfile and George and I. So one of the things is foster cares. We're working on gender roles for boys, mental health, unconscious bias, inclusivity and diversity, and character strengths. So at this workshop, we brought together people on foster care.
In foster care, and Miriam Guilfoyle was talking about, so there was one foster kid who was having tensions at the household that he was placed at with the biological kid there. And, I thought, okay, well, it's because, he's a stranger, he's coming in, or not sharing the toys, what's going on? It turned out the biological kid was jealous of the foster kid, not the other way around. And so, well, what could the biological kid have possibly been jealous of? Well, it turns out the foster kid was getting weekly monitor visits to make sure, and the biological kid's like, where are my weekly monitor visits? And it's like, it's such
you can't make that up,
but it's such, of course a kid would think like that. Why is someone else getting something out? It's like, you want a weekly monitor visit? But it's human nature, is always surprising, but but again, that's an authentic story. I could have never come up with my own, but it's so amusing and it's such a great twist that I would have never figured that on my own. And so so having being at a table with someone who could relay that to me is so meaningful. It's so powerful, and it's just great stories that you can use, in a script.
And one of the things we're trying to do with that foster care work is to improve and normalize representations of foster care youth and those that work with them, because they're often written as such high stakes and conflict, and they've got the drug addict mom and blah, blah, blah. But instead, most of these children, and there's a high need for being foster parents in Los Angeles County in particular. So we're trying to get that message across, but most of these kids feel they just want to be represented just like any other kid, They want the biological kid to be jealous of them, and so we're trying to help get that message out to content creators. So we got a question from Facebook by Kat Smith. Do you want to read it?
Sure. I'm wondering about their views on point of view. If you want to affect change, is it necessary to take a side, or is it possible to tackle a provocative subject while trying to remain neutral so as to attract audiences from both sides of the political spectrum? I think, look, any good storytelling relies on conflict. You want to be able, to have some friction, because that's what keeps, the sparks alive in a story. If I were just to present one thesis and say, oh no, this is all good, that's kind of boring. That gets into that sort of documentary versus narrative thing. But if there's someone pushing back, but someone articulating another point of view that's just as valid, then that's where some interesting stuff can happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say that's the power of storytelling. The power of storytelling is that you can have accurate information and hopefully balanced information combined with emotion. Because emotion actually moves the needle a lot more, and that's that narrative versus, and that was shown that's been shown over and over again. In that Day After Tomorrow study, they looked at whether the movie changed perceptions and attitudes around climate change or news stories around the same time. And the movie was much more powerful than the news stories because in a way it feels neutral. A story feels neutral. A documentary usually has a point of view even though it's supposed to be neutral.
Right.
And even though a news story is supposed to be neutral too, we all know that each station has its own political slant. So a story is supposed to be neutral, and I think, in fact, when you're trying to reach a certain audience, and let's say it's a political audience, Republicans and Democrats watch different shows. There is a study out of USC, the Paley Center, that looked at the shows that Republicans and Democrats watch. So if you're trying to move the needle in a point of view with one party versus another, to tell a story that a Republican watched and making it feel neutral and smuggling in the message with emotion, that's a very powerful way to do it. And if you're doing it for an adolescent who may not really be sure of their political beliefs, they're trying to figure it out, they're about to go off to college, they're pushing mom and dad away, that's even more powerful. And if you combine it with social media or websites, places where they can actually do something about what they get to see on screen, which we're actually starting to test, that is, we believe, one of the most powerful ways. And ditto for Democrat,
No, the idea is, look, great storytelling relies on conflict. You want to have voices, colliding with each other. No one, Richard Walter, who founded the screenwriting program here, has a famous saying, is like, nobody wants to see a movie about a village of happy people.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, he's right. That would be boring. If everyone agreed, yeah, I agree with you. You're absolutely right. And the discussion, where's the fun? Okay, great, we're done. Goodbye. So conflict, opposing points of view are valid because that helps tell stories.
Yeah. So I think you're supposed to read the
Okay,
red.
so let's see. Our next question is from Instagram by Kids Media Mom. If you two could collaborate on any research study at any budget, what would it be? Wow.
So since I think I'm supposed to answer that, and then you can jump in.
Mm-hmm.
I would really love to start to measure some of these ideas around watching a piece of content, looking at the social media conversation around the piece of content, and then coming up with some sort of campaign or some place where the people that are watching it, adolescents, tweens, teens, could then go to learn more about the topic or to do some kind of social action. I'd love to sort of understand what's the best way to do that. And in fact, we are doing something like that. We were very generously funded by SMART, S-M-A-H-R-T, to look at 13 Reasons Why, Season 3, which is coming out in 2 days, and we're actually have 150 adolescents, we're hoping, that will watch the show, and we'll have a control group and actual group of kids watching it, adolescents, and we're going to do a pre and a post survey to try to understand what they're learning from the show. At the same time, we're going to create a social media campaign, and we're going to measure that's tied to topics in the show. We're going to measure those, and we're going to do a social listening campaign and work with a company to understand the conversation that's going on around that. I would love to do that with a movie. I would love to do that with more television. I'd love to smuggle in the message in a particular piece of content tied to one political party or not. I'd love to do all sorts of things.
You want to talk about, did we talk about some of the things we've covered in the workshop?
Sure.
So obviously foster care, but we've, in mental health, you talked about
Yep.
13 Reasons Why. We've also been studying unconscious bias.
Yep.
Yeah. So, we've been creating, you've been creating short training modules targeted specifically for content creators to help them understand why and how to combat their own unconscious biases.
Yes, so we're working with experts in that arena, in unconscious bias, and we're creating, and we're talking to several studios who are interested in getting our content, creating this sort of training modules just for content creators. So people who are creative and trying to help them understand why it's important to do this. Not only because it's the right thing to do, but as you said, that's kind of boring. Right. It's also because the audience will relate to it. It's also because, here are the real world things that can happen when you get it wrong. There's a study that looked at 4 different groups: boys, girls, white girls, black girls, white boys, black boys. 1 year of watching TV. I think this was Nicole Martin's. After 1 year of watching TV, there was only one group out of those 4 groups that their global self-esteem was improved the more TV they watched. Which group do you think it was?
White boys.
Yeah. Oh, good guess. So, what does that tell you? They saw more of themselves represented on screen in positive ways, while these other groups didn't. And, I don't think any of us want to hurt children's self-esteem, do we? So these things are important. And we also are trying to give strategies. So I'm going to give you one strategy, which I haven't shared, maybe I've shared with you. Right. Counter stereotypical narrative.
Wow, that's a mouthful, but
I know, it's a very academic
stereotypical narrative. Yeah, what is an acronym for that?
Yeah, exactly. We need an acronym. So, but basically what they've done, and this is sort of goes to our gender roles for boys' work too, but what they've seen is that if you want to improve racial sort of representation, and if you show an African American hero, that's going to, be a positive and move. And they've actually tested around unconscious bias. It actually changes unconscious bias, and it reduces unconscious race bias. The best thing to do, though, if you want to have the most impact, is not just show an African American hero, but also show a Caucasian villain. together.
Okay.
That takes it up to 40% of a change in unconscious bias with just moving one.
So moving one piece on the puzzle board isn't enough. You have to move all the pieces around.
And the
Okay.
same thing has to happen with girls and boys. You know, we put a lot of attention into girls.
Right. Gender roles is something else that we've been talking about at these workshops and studying.
Yeah. And changing representations of boys too, who, you know, toxic masculinity is actually related to more suicide ideation, depression. So let's give them more rounded representation along with showing girls in counter stereotypical, stronger. Together, the two together will actually move the needle the best.
Right. No, absolutely. And look, you know, despite all the studies, we still have to get that information out to the people who make these decisions, you know, even at the table, you know, because we were, you know, I'll be honest, I sort of a little mean and called out some of the studios on this and, you know, said, hey, you know, because why are you making these changes? Why aren't you, like, you know, embracing more diverse gender roles? And, you know, to their credit, they defended it's like, look, there was a development executive, she was talking about, she was championing a car show for girls, you know, and she was taking it as far as she possibly could, but marketing and merchandising said, no, girls will never play with cars. Switch it back to boys.
Which is,
you know,
because it's tied to the toy industry.
Yeah,
and I think
which is why we have to get this information out to not only content creators, but to marketing, to merchandising, you know. The idea that, you know, no, we have to make this show about cars solely for boys because of the play patterns. It's like, girls play with cars too.
And we need to see boys playing with dolls, by the way.
No. I mean, I think I told you this story. So my 4- and 5-year-old, they're obsessed with Disney princesses, you know. They wear dresses all the time, and they sing "Let It Go." They're wearing crowns, and but it's really, you know. And
do you feel uncomfortable? Tell the truth.
No. I only started feeling uncomfortable when other dads and moms came up to me at school and said, like, "I really admire what you're doing." I go, "What am I doing? I'm not doing it." But, you know, just letting them be themselves. If that's what, you know, that entertains them, if that's what excites them, that's what they're passionate about. Yeah, pursue their passion. You want to stand on top of the stairs in a dress and sing "Let It Go"? Have at it.
But the sad thing is they're going to start paying attention to the
exactly,
other kids
and that's
now,
the thing that's the thing that worries me because, you know, we're getting it. No, you know, look, if I'm getting it from the parents, you know, I can only imagine what they're facing in the classroom. And that's that's a
and
you know,
those
sad.
Kids are getting it at home, and then they're going to bring it to school, and they're going to look at your kids differently, and ultimately, unfortunately, we've got to get to a point where. And that's what representation can do. Actually, one of the studies that was done, or quite a few studies, have looked at the way that movies and television and content actually changes attitudes and behaviors. And one thought is it's not direct. It's not like you watch it and you immediately go, okay, I'm going to change. You know, it is that it gives you a different perception of social norms. So, like with Glee, for example, then all of a sudden the social norm was, you know, look at this wide group of kids. They're all different kinds, all different sexual orientations, and they're all great. That's the norm. There's nothing weird. That person isn't strange. That person isn't different. And then all of a sudden kids start embracing that and feeling comfortable. So if we saw representation of kids, boys dancing in dresses, you know, and people started, and we are starting to see it.
Yeah, we are starting to see it, which is great.
Isn't like, who's the guy, Billy Parker, or the guy that...
Oh, Billy Porter, on Pose.
Yeah,
yes.
so exactly,
absolutely,
we are starting to see it, but we need to bring that down to kids as well.
Right.
So another question from Facebook, from Louise Landry. How can storytellers access research?
Well, through the Center for Scholars and Storytelling. I mean, no, one of the great things that you've been doing is putting up, you know, research insights, you know. I think one of the goals of the center is also to connect storytellers with academics, you know, so you two can directly, you know, collaborate, you know, can get information, you know, directly from and through the center. I mean, you know, look, in the old days, look, you know, I'll be honest, like when I wrote SWAT, you know, I had to rely on the producers in the studios, like, hey, hook me up with the police department. So in the old days, it used to be, it was either a family friend or, you know, someone you went to high school with that you would get the research from. But now we have resources like the center that can put you in touch with people who are at the top of their field in the, you know, this research and give you these sort of nuggets that'll be great for your scripts.
And there's also, like, so we have our Story Insights. There's also the Science and Entertainment Exchange. They do a lot of great work. There's Hollywood Health and Society. There's plenty of places that you can go and often get free consults. And then obviously lots of people hire consultants. We're trying to figure out a way to give the information as simply and easily to storytellers so it can scale, and that they can do it. As one writer said, I just want this information at 3 in the morning when I'm in my pajamas, right? I mean, I'm married to a writer, I know. They don't want to leave the house a lot. So it's a lot of, it's heavy lifting to meet with a consultant, especially a consultant who may not understand what your job is. So we're trying to shape that and help academics share the information in a content creator friendly way. But we have a ways to go.
And I think we'll embed the links to not only CSS, but these other science and film exchange, all the other things. So as if you want to pursue further research and with those sites you can.
And you can always email us and ask us as well. So please, we only have a few more minutes, so please, if you, I know, where did the time go? If you have more questions, you have a few more minutes there's a little bit of a lag, so you better put it in now. But you want to go ahead and read that
and
question?
then should we just, if you had any problems with the live stream, if you're just catching us now, we're putting up the whole thing on the center website, so you'll be able to not only access it today, tomorrow, whenever you want, and hopefully will be a helpful future resource for you. So let's see, another question. So from Facebook, from Alejandra Diaz de Leon, Yalda, you mentioned YouTube content creators earlier, so it got me thinking, do you plan on expanding your work on CSS to reach out to YouTube creators and influencers? Since they can have so much influence, do you think they should be held responsible for the images and stories they're putting online?
Well, I mean, that's always the challenge for any content creator. I mean, we have freedom of speech, right? And sanity, not censorship, is a motto of common sense. I totally agree with it. I don't think by punishing, our motto is let's use the carrot, not the stick. Let's inspire people to do the right thing rather than punish them for doing the wrong thing. We believe, George and I were in the industry, we wanted to do the right thing, and if we can give them the tools and the ways to do the right things, storytellers will do it. But we do believe YouTube influencers are huge. They're really important. In fact, I was at YouTube 2 days ago. I'm actually on the YouTube Family and Kids Council. We really believe that YouTube is a very, very powerful mechanism for kids. Many of them watch that more than anything else. And they're working hard because they realize they need to, to take the responsibility, YouTube does, to help their creators who basically it's a very different model than a studio where you hire and you own the IP. The creator in YouTube has that IP. So they're working very, very hard to make sure that they're helping their creators have resources that help them understand how to be responsible for the power they have on YouTube. And we're hoping to work with them on that. So we've been working with Disney, myself and a pediatrician, Dr. Cara Natterson, on giving lessons to talents and content creators about how to be responsible storytellers, and we're hoping to offer that to other people. So let's keep reading since we're getting some questions.
All right.
Blue is you or me?
I think you read to me if it's blue. Sorry.
Okay. From Instagram by ChloeU99. How important is likability in a character as opposed to relatability? Brilliant question.
Now, well, again, relatability is always much more important because, storytelling, the greatest power about storytelling in film is empathy. If you can relate to a character, if you can empathize with a character, you can understand that character. You may not agree with what the character is doing, but if you understand what the character wants, if you understand the character's journey, then you're gonna be interested in the story and some attachment. Likability is harder because, how do you gauge that? What I like may be completely different than what you like. And that's where you start to get into dangerous traps when you try to mandate or enumerate what is likable, because we all have different tastes. Some people like spicy food, some people don't. It doesn't mean it's not a judgment call. So if you try to write to likability, again, what are you writing to? Because I don't know what you like. You know, I know what I like, so that's the only thing I can do. What I can hope to do is like, look, I will tell you why I like spicy food, and if you relate to that, then it makes the story much more impactful.
So, I mean, to me, relatability is identification with the character. Yeah, so there's a lot of studies on that if anyone's interested. It's funny because there's so much research in communications about the ways that stories work, identification with character, transposing yourself into another place. And it's just something that intuitively storytellers know. It's not even like academics study it, storytellers know it. And that's sort of the premise of our center too, is that storytellers have a lot to offer researchers. Storytellers can help researchers design experiments that would be useful in their day-to-day process. So
or even help get information across in a way that sticks.
Yeah,
with,
exactly.
With readers and an audience.
Well, academics I think they understand that storytellers could take their research and spread it, but they don't understand that storytellers understand can offer a lot to the research process. A lot of them don't. That the research design, if you do it together in an interdisciplinary way, it's probably going to be more powerful. Okay, you read that one, right?
Okay,
or is that to me?
From Facebook by Lisa Caruso. How do you get buy-in from the network streamers studios on the importance of impact on attitudes, behaviors, so they're not concerned that it's too mission-oriented and could compromise the entertainment value?
Oh boy, that is the
question.
big question.
That's a holy grail, isn't it?
We try to smuggle the message in. We try to tell them that their audience is diverse, their audience cares about social impact. You know, we give them all those kinds of statistics in our 13 Reasons Why campaign. What we're actually going to try to do is look at where the conversation is online. So if it's around depression while they're watching the show, or mental health, we're going to look for certain pieces of content. Then we're going to go to Netflix and say, look, your audience is talking about this stuff. If we give them some information around it, it will only expand the reach of your audience. You know, sometimes if they work with the right groups and get buy-in early on, like Hidden Figures, you know, got buy-in from Black Girls Code, you know, early on, then those people can be your evangelists. You know, ultimately the story has to be the story. If it's too didactic, and I mean, that's why when academics often tell stories, they're not great, it is going to flop, and that's not going to be of any use. Let the storytellers do what they do and feed them the information that will help them make their story resonate with their audience. But yeah, that's always the challenge.
It's always hard, As a writer, you know, you try to, okay, look, I will tell the story. I'll leave it to the producer or the executive or marketing to figure out the best way to push the story through the system to get it made. Yeah, and look, these are now big companies. They're giant, and obviously, look, they are there for the bottom line. So if you can present it in a way, spin it in a way that's like, look, diversity translates to more eyeballs, which translates to more money, then that's the way you sort of sneak it in, I guess.
CAA has done studies. I think the Inclusionistas have done studies. Gina Davis has done great studies. I mean, there's so many studies that now show that. Data is a really good way. Our study, another study we're doing on unconscious biases, we're showing what happens if you get it wrong. Like if you make a mistake and you cast the wrong person, or you don't have the right writing team, how does that impact your bottom line? So the more you can talk about money, obviously, the better.
But write the story first, then sort of back your, don't let the cart lead the horse, Write the story and then figure out the elements that you can use to sort of push it through to, I mean, it's always the challenge of making a movie. So, let's see, from Instagram by It's Just Dasha. What current shows you personally feel have the most positive impact on audiences, in your opinion?
Well, I loved Andy Mack, which was a show at Disney. Of course, like The Fosters is a great show. Good Trouble Now. There's, what's the NBC show? It's This Is Us.
This Is Us, I love that.
Show. The only problem with some of those shows is they're sort of, some of them preach to the converted. So ironically, I actually really liked Roseanne before it canceled, because it smuggled the message in and was playing to a different audience, but it was smuggling in a message about immigration, about all of us being the same, about inclusion, and it was likely getting to an audience that may not necessarily think that. So I think those are the kinds of things I'd like to measure and understand better.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Okay, from Instagram by 3Fash Papa, how can diversity be accomplished in globally distributed content that needs to aim for the lowest common ground?
Wow, okay. Again, I don't know if you can write diversity, like John Cho, the actor, is, very fond of saying, look, if I take a look at a script and reads Asian or Korean American, he usually passes because, he wants a character that's not just reduced to race,
Yeah.
You want a character that's fully developed. You want a character that's a dad,
Good
that's
point.
a brother, that is a struggling executive or a successful writer, what have you. You want to write a multi-dimensional character and then ideally find the best actor to convey that character. And yes, if you cast accordingly, again, studies are now showing that diversity does, translate to box office dollars, then that will always, be the way to sort of, again, sneak diversity in. But ultimately, the character has to be a real three-dimensional, well-rounded, interesting character, that will, get people excited about wanting to follow this character through whatever adventure or journey they're going through.
And I would also just say, diversity and inclusion, apparently Shonda Rhimes does not like the term diversity, possibly because of that.
Right.
You don't want to just add one character and then say, I checked my box.
Yep.
The reason, the ways to do it is not just on camera, you can do it behind camera, you can do it with below the line, you can do it all sorts of different ways. So think of it as a very wide tent and many, many different ways. And if you have a diverse group of writers, they will naturally help your content on camera be more diverse and inclusive.
Right.
The lowest common ground often isn't that bad. We are in a world that is very diverse, and America's becoming more diverse. And you can accomplish a lot with these shows that lots of people watch. The challenge is to get the people creating those shows to recognize their power and hopefully, work towards trying to do that. Reality TV shows.
Right.
I think there's a great deal of content out there that we could be making more impact with. So I think we are almost, we're at 101. I'm going to just tell you, we're going to have more of these, everybody. And it won't next time it won't be me and George, unless the demand is great. I
So
know
write
you'll,
in.
Yeah.
We need a renewal.
We will have, we're going to have more scholars, more storytellers. We're hoping to do one on mental health. We're hoping to do one on foster care. We're hoping to do one on character development. We will have a writer, director, creator, and a researcher who is well-versed in that field, and they will hone in on that specific topic. The dates, we're going to be doing this the second Friday of every month. The next one is October 11th, and we're going to do it at 1 p.m., standard lunchtime for industry.
That's Pacific time.
Pacific
West
time, and
Coast.
industry, maybe not the new streamers, but back in our day.
Right.
December 13th at 1 p.m. and February 14th, Valentine's Day. That one might be about love at 1 p.m. And if we have any extra surprise guests, we'll let you know. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for those great questions. This is really our first one, so thank you, George,
Thank
for
you,
doing
Yalda,
this. Thank you, Kwa. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Caroline. Storytelling as social change, why and how stories have impact. We're happy to answer questions on any of our social media. If you didn't get a chance to have it answered, we will answer them. And signing out.
Yep.
Any last words?
Nope. Just
Okay.
thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.